Essentially, for all that on the surface this looks like a democratic government with elections and so forth, essentially it's much more like an old monarchical system. There is a Tsar, and all the different agencies of government are there simply to do what the Tsar wants. And in that respect, these agencies, the Siloviki agencies, perform two functions. First of all, they're his sources of information. They tell him what he thinks he needs to know. And the trouble is, often they tell him what he wants to hear instead of what's really going on. But secondly, they are also the final instrument of his rule. They are the people who can go out and ensure that every ministry, every regional governor or whatever is doing what he's told. So in that respect, they are absolutely crucial to Putin's system of rule. They're both his eyes and his ears, and also his strong right hand. Essentially, Putin thinks that Russia ought to be regarded as a great power, which you might think fair enough. But the trouble is, what he thinks that means, a great power has to be totally independent of also things like international law and international values. And secondly, a great power has to have a sphere of influence, and he looks at countries such as Ukraine and Georgia as being within that sphere of influence. So in some ways, he's defensive. He wants the West to back off. He wants the West to simply to recognise his little empire. Of course, the trouble is, if we do that, we're basically abandoning the whole principles of the post-1945 economic global order. But nonetheless, I think that is ultimately what he would like. He basically wants us just to recognise his Russia's place in the world that he thinks sits right, and also his Russia's sphere of influence over its regioning. I mean, of course, this is the completely unanswerable question in so many ways. We've seen Donald Trump expressing this quite bizarre fascination almost with Russia. However, in the long term, I don't think we're going to see some great coming together of Russia and the United States. First of all, because I think when Trump and Putin meet, I think the personal chemistry is likely not to work. Secondly, that when it comes down to it, what Russia wants is completely out of sync with what Russia can offer. You know, Russia is a decaying country with a small economy. The total Russian economy is smaller than that of New York City. So in that kind of context, there's really not much Putin can offer the author of The Art of the Deal for some kind of grand geopolitical bargain, except some sort of minor stuff around the edges. If anything, I think the Russians are worried, because they've always relied on Washington being the responsible, mature party. They push the boundaries, Washington comes in and tries to smooth things over. With Trump, they have someone who even they can't predict what he's going to do. So I think the problem for Russia's point of view is asserting itself without actually triggering some kind of a backlash. Because the trouble is, with Trump, we realise that he could well do things that are much more erratic, much more dangerous than previous American presidents.